The voting chamber fell silent after the final count appeared on the holographic display. 247 votes against, 1 vote in favor. Ambassador David Ross gathered his papers with steady hands while species from across the galaxy watched him. Some looked apologetic, others indifferent, but most seemed relieved the debate had ended. David walked to the center podium one last time. His gray hair and weathered face showed his 40 years of service to both humanity and the Galactic Council. He had joined as a young diplomat full of hope, believing Earth would finally have a voice among the stars. Now he understood the difference between having a seat and being heard. "Honored members," David began, his voice calm and measured. "For 80 standard years, humanity has served this council faithfully. We have maintained your stations, coordinated your trade routes, and solved problems nobody else wanted to touch. We asked for nothing except consideration when we brought concerns to this chamber." Ambassador Rilna, an insectoid with crystalline wings, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had voted with the majority, following her government's orders despite personal misgivings. "Today marks the 73rd proposal humanity has brought before this council," David continued. "The 73rd proposal you have rejected. We suggested building redundancy into the communication networks. We warned that concentrating all expertise in single points creates vulnerability. We showed data, models, and risk assessments. You voted it down as unnecessary expense." Chancellor Brenvik, whose amphibian species had founded the council 3,000 years ago, waved a webbed hand dismissively. "Young species always worry excessively. The council has maintained stability for millennia. Your anxiety does not justify the expenditure." David smiled, though sadness filled his eyes. "You are correct, Chancellor. Our anxiety does not justify the expenditure. Therefore, effective in 30 days, humanity will withdraw from the Galactic Council. We will honor all existing contracts to their completion date, then cease our involvement in council affairs." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted questions, demands, and protests. Brenvik's throat sac inflated with anger. Rilna stood, her wings buzzing in distress, but David had already left the podium. Tessa Wade, a junior diplomat in her first year of service, met David outside the chamber. Her hands trembled slightly. "Sir, they're going to panic when they realize what we actually do here." "I know," David replied. "Pack your office, Tessa. We have 29 days to complete our withdrawal with dignity." Across the council headquarters, human staff began the orderly process of departure. Engineers left detailed handoff notes for equipment they maintained. Administrators organized files and access codes. Communications specialists documented procedures. Everything done properly, professionally, by the book. On the medical station orbiting Trellis Prime, Dr. Henley Park supervised the transfer of her department to a Felarian physician. "The environmental controls integrate 17 different species requirements," she explained. "Oxygen levels, temperature, humidity, gravity, all cycling through different zones. The management system was designed by humans to handle the complexity." The Felarian doctor, whose species breathed methane, looked at the control interface with growing concern. "This seems extremely complicated." "It is," Henley agreed. "But it works. Just follow the maintenance schedule every 8 hours." She did not mention that she had written the maintenance schedule herself, or that she intuitively adjusted it based on station occupancy and species mix. Some knowledge could only be gained through practice. In the logistics hub of Sector 7, human coordinators shut down their stations. Previs, a Gulnari merchant, watched them leave with increasing worry. "Who will manage the shipping routes?" he asked. A human logistics officer named Carmen shrugged. "The automated system should handle it. Just follow the protocols." "But what if something goes wrong?" Previs pressed. "Last month, 3 different species cargo requirements conflicted. You found a solution in 20 minutes." "I'm sure the council will figure it out," Carmen said gently. Our contract ends in 4 weeks. Previs had worked with humans for 15 years. He knew their talent for understatement. When they said the council would figure it out, they meant nobody else had any idea how to handle the situation. 23 days into the withdrawal, Chancellor Brenvik called an emergency session. "The humans are actually leaving," he announced, as if this surprised him. "We must discuss filling their positions." Rilna had spent 3 weeks reviewing humanity's contributions. The list seemed endless. Infrastructure maintenance, cross-species communication, trade coordination, medical protocols, educational materials, entertainment networks, and 1,000 other services nobody had considered important because they simply worked. "Chancellor, we need to contact Earth's government," Rilna said. "Negotiate a new arrangement. We underestimated their value." "Absolutely not," Brenvik snapped. "We will not beg a species barely a century old to reconsider. Other species will fill these roles. We managed before humans arrived. We will manage after they leave." But Earth had not joined an empty galaxy. Humans had joined a complex, interconnected civilization and made themselves essential by doing what nobody else could or would do. They solved problems that required understanding multiple perspectives simultaneously. They bridged gaps between species who barely tolerated each other. They made incompatible systems work together through creativity and persistence. On the final day, David Ross stood in his empty office. 80 years of service packed into storage containers. He recorded one last message for the council archives. "We came to you as students hopping to learn. We leave as teachers, though you never wanted the lesson. Humanity will remember the council fondly. We made friends here, learned much, and contributed what we could. We hope you find solutions to the challenges ahead. Perhaps someday we will meet again as true equals. Until then, we wish you well." 7 days after the last human departed council space, alarms screamed through Medical Station Trellis Prime. Environmental controls failed in the Sector 4 ward. 17 species evacuated in emergency suits while technicians frantically searched for solutions. The maintenance schedule made no sense without understanding why each step mattered. The Felarian doctor called Henley Park's personal contact. The message returned undeliverable. She had blocked all council communications. In the logistics hub, Previs's ship sat stranded at a station where refueling systems had stopped working. Nobody knew how to restart them because 3 different technologies needed precise synchronization. The human who understood that synchronization had retired to Earth. Across council space, small failures multiplied. Nothing catastrophic yet, just inconveniences. A translator glitch here, a scheduling conflict there, a shipment delayed. But the galaxy ran on millions of small systems working in harmony, and harmony required a conductor. The conductor had left the stage. Rilna stood in the empty human quarter of council headquarters, reading reports of spreading problems. She finally understood what David had tried to tell them. Humanity had not been asking for power or prestige. They had been trying to teach the council to maintain what they had built together. The lesson was beginning. Previs had never considered himself an expert on anything except selling quality textiles across 12 sectors. Now, he sat in an emergency council, meeting as the only merchant representative, surrounded by politicians and military officers who suddenly wanted to know how trade actually worked. "Explain again why the shipping routes are failing," demanded Admiral Creston, her feathered crest flaring with impatience. Previs pulled up a holographic map showing the major trade corridors. Red warnings blinked across 70% of the network. Each species uses different fuel types, different engine configurations, different navigation systems. Humans created universal docking protocols that let any ship refuel anywhere. Without them updating the compatibility databases, everything is reverting to species-specific standards. "Then we simply update the databases ourselves," Brenvik said. "With what information?" Previs asked. Humans understood how a Fellarian methane drive interfaces with a Trellian fusion port. They knew which adapter protocols worked for which combinations. That knowledge came from decades of practical experience, not from reading manuals. Rilna accessed her personal files, searching through years of ignored human reports. She found one from 12 years ago titled Critical Infrastructure Vulnerability Assessment. The introduction made her compound eyes close in shame. This council relies on human expertise for 63% of all interspecies coordination functions, she read aloud. Failure to train redundant personnel across multiple species creates systemic risk. We recommend immediate establishment of cross-species technical training programs. What was the council's response? Admiral Creston asked. Rilna checked the attached notes, tabled indefinitely due to budget concerns. A message alert interrupted the meeting. Another crisis, this time on the civilian colony transport Bright Future. The ship carried 40,000 passengers from 8 different species toward a new settlement world. Its navigation system had crashed, stranding the vessel between star systems. "Send rescue ships," Brenvik ordered. "We have," Admiral Creston replied grimly. 3 different species sent vessels. They cannot coordinate their approach vectors. Their communication protocols are incompatible. Every time they get close, their computers argue about docking procedures. The room fell silent. Such a simple problem, yet without humans to make different systems talk to each other, it had become unsolvable. Previs spoke quietly. "I know a human who might help, Captain Io Okonkwo. She hauls independent freight now, no council contracts, but she is a good person." "Contact her immediately," Brenvik commanded. "Offer whatever payment she requires." 2 hours later, Io's response arrived. She would help the stranded ship, but not for payment and not as a favor to the council. She would do it because 40,000 innocent people needed help. The distinction felt pointed. Io arrived in her modified cargo hauler, a ship that somehow interfaced with council technology despite being independently built. She spent 6 hours working with the rescue vessels, creating temporary communication bridges and coordination protocols. The passengers were saved. Rilna contacted Io directly afterward. "Thank you for helping them. Please, can we discuss humanity's return to the council? We made mistakes. We want to correct them." Io's face on the view screen showed more sadness than anger. "Ambassador, I was 11 when my parents worked on Council Station Gamma. They maintained the water purification systems that served 23 different species. They worked 16-hour days because nobody else knew how to balance that many different biological requirements. When they proposed hiring more humans to share the workload, the council said it was too expensive." "What happened?" Rilna asked, though she feared the answer. "They died when the system overloaded during a crisis. They were too exhausted to handle properly. I was raised by other human engineers on that station, people who stepped in to fill my parents' roles because somebody had to do it. We did not do this work for glory, Ambassador. We did it because it needed doing. But after 8 decades of being essential yet ignored, humanity decided to invest our efforts elsewhere." "Where?" Rilna asked. Io smiled slightly. "Somewhere we are appreciated. Good luck, Ambassador, I truly mean that." The transmission ended. Rilna sat in darkness, thinking about all the human faces she had seen over the years. Friendly, helpful, competent people who solved problems and asked little in return. She had voted with her government, followed orders, maintained diplomatic protocol. She had never considered whether protocol served justice. 3 more emergencies emerged that week. A medical station ran out of compatible blood supplies because humans had managed the complex interspecies donation networks. A university could not coordinate class schedules for its multi-species student body. A restaurant district on a major hub station shut down because food safety protocols for different metabolisms had been human-maintained. Ordinary life throughout council space became extraordinarily difficult. Things that had worked seamlessly for decades now required hours of frustration. Citizens began demanding answers. Why had the council allowed such dependence on one species? Why had human warnings been ignored? Why had their proposals for redundancy and training been rejected? The economic projections arrived on day 43 of humanity's absence. Galactic GDP would contract by 32% within one standard year if current trends continued. Unemployment would rise. Supply chains would fracture. Some worlds might face actual shortages of necessary goods. This is unacceptable, Brenvik declared at the Emergency Economic Summit. We must compel Earth to honor its obligations to galactic stability. What obligations? Rilna demanded, her voice sharp with frustration she no longer bothered to hide. They fulfilled every contract. They gave proper notice. They left documentation. They did everything legally and professionally. We have no claim on them. Then what do you suggest? Brenvik challenged. I suggest we admit we were wrong. I suggest we apologize. I suggest we offer humanity a real voice in council decisions proportional to their contributions. I suggest we treat them as equals instead of as useful servants. That would set a dangerous precedent, another delegate argued. Other young species would demand similar consideration. Good, Rilna said. Perhaps they should. Perhaps we have been coasting on ancient glory for too long. Perhaps we need to remember that a council should listen to all its members. The debate raged for hours, getting nowhere. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, humans continued building something new in their independent territories, something that did not need council approval to exist. The question was no longer whether the council needed humanity. That had been answered conclusively. The question was whether humanity still needed the council, and with each passing day, the answer seemed increasingly clear. The lecture hall at Centaurus University had once held 500 students from 30 different worlds. Now it sat half empty, with clusters of single-species groups scattered throughout the tiered seating. Professor Aldris, a Centauran with 4 arms and patient eyes, addressed the sparse crowd. We will resume the molecular biology course once we resolve the translation issues, she announced. The lecture materials were calibrated for cross-species comprehension by human educational specialists. Without them, I can either teach in Centauran for my own species or attempt simplified galactic common that loses most technical precision. A Felarian student raised a tendril. Can we not simply hire new human contractors? Aldris manipulated her data tablet with 2 hands while gesturing with the others. Earth's government has declined all educational contracts. They are focusing resources on their own institutions. Several human professors have sent personal messages expressing regret, but they respect their government's decision. Across the campus, the dining commons faced similar problems. The facility had served authentic cuisine for dozens of species, with careful attention to dietary requirements, allergies, and cultural preferences. Now the kitchen staff could only prepare foods for species whose biology they understood. Students from less common worlds went hungry or ate nutritionally inadequate substitutes. In the administration building, Dean Horvath reviewed the enrollment numbers, down 40% in just 6 weeks. Students were transferring to single-species institutions where communication and basic services still functioned. The dream of universal education was collapsing. Perhaps the council was premature in creating multi-species institutions, his assistant suggested. Perhaps we should focus on what we can actually manage. Or perhaps we should have listened when humans told us to train backup personnel, Horvath replied bitterly. He had been one of the voices opposing increased education budgets. The savings had seemed so reasonable at the time. In the commercial district of Station Unity, restaurant owner Galissa watched her business die. For 20 years, she had served customers from across the galaxy, pride herself on accommodating every species that walked through her door. Human consultants had helped her design a kitchen where Metherian chefs could safely prepare dishes for oxygen-breathing customers, where heat requirements for silicon-based foods did not endanger carbon-based staff. Now her Metherian chef had quit because the atmospheric separation system kept failing. Her silicon-based serving staff had left after 3 customers got sick from improper food temperature. She could still serve her own species, the Galicians, but that market alone could not sustain the business. "I don't understand," she told Previs, who had become an unofficial spokesman for merchant concerns. "The equipment is all here. The protocols are documented. Why can't we make it work?" Previs had asked himself the same question countless times. Because humans didn't just follow protocols. They understood why protocols existed. When something went wrong, they diagnosed problems by thinking about all the interconnected systems at once. We only know our own piece. He showed her a diagnostic report from her kitchen. "See this. Your atmospheric separator is reading 0.3% oxygen contamination in the methane zone, technically within tolerance. A Metherian technician sees that and says it is fine. A human technician would ask why it increased from 0.1% last week. They would track down the source before it became a safety issue." "So we need to think like humans," Galissa said. "We need to train people to think across specialties," Previs corrected. "Humans came from a world that forced them to be generalists. Every other species evolved in stable environments where specialization made sense. Now we pay the price." Brenvik refused to accept that explanation. In his private chambers, he watched reports from across council space with growing anger. The galaxy had functioned for 3,000 years before humans arrived. It had survived wars, plagues, and economic collapses. It would survive this temporary disruption. "The humans are bluffing," he told his advisors. "They depend on galactic trade as much as anyone. They will come back when their own economy suffers." But the reports from human space told a different story. Independent traders brought word of thriving colonies, expanding industries, and scientific advances. Humanity had not retreated into isolation. They had pivoted to working with species who had left the council or never joined it. The Vorlathi, a species that had departed the council 40 years ago over philosophical differences, now partnered extensively with humans. The Kryn, who had been denied council membership for political reasons, found humans eager to trade and share knowledge. Even some council species were quietly sending delegations to human stations. Admiral Creston received intelligence that made her crest flatten with worry. "Chancellor, I think you should see this." She displayed sensor data from the frontier regions. Human stations were multiplying rapidly, using construction techniques that combined methods from a dozen different species. More concerning, they were building warships using hybrid technologies that council military analysts had never considered possible. "They are preparing for conflict," Brenvik said. "I don't think so," Creston replied. "These are defensive platforms protecting trade routes, but look at the design philosophy. They assumed cooperation between different species systems rather than standardization on one approach. It's more efficient and more adaptable than anything we've built." Rilna studied the data with growing understanding. "They learned from us. They took the best ideas from every council species and integrated them. This is what we could have become if we had listened to their proposals." "We still have superior numbers," Brenvik insisted. "Superior industrial capacity." "We have stagnation," Rilna countered. "We have been coasting on ancient achievements for so long that we forgot how to innovate. Humans spent 80 years learning from everyone, and now they are surpassing us." A new alert arrived. Another station failure, this time affecting the central banking network. Financial transactions between different species' economic systems had relied on human-maintained conversion algorithms. Without constant updates, Currency exchanges were producing increasingly inaccurate results. Fortunes were being lost to rounding errors and exchange rate miscalculations. "How long until total economic collapse?" Brenvik asked quietly. Rilna checked the projections. "4 months, maybe 5, unless we find solutions or the humans agree to help. Then we compel them." "With what leverage?" Rilna demanded. "They owe us nothing. We need them, but they have built a new life without us. The only thing we can offer is what we should have offered 80 years ago: respect, partnership, and genuine equality." Brenvik's throat sac inflated and deflated several times. Finally, he spoke. "Send a message to Earth. Request formal negotiations. We will discuss new terms of engagement." "They will demand significant concessions," Rilna warned. "I know," Brenvik said, "but pride is expensive and we can no longer afford the price." River Tanaka had never expected to represent humanity in any official capacity. At 26, she was a systems engineer who preferred working with machines over politicians. Now she sat across from a council delegation in a conference room aboard New Nairobi Station, humanity's largest independent facility. "Your station is impressive," Rilna admitted, looking through the transparent walls at the bustling commerce levels below. Species from across the galaxy moved through markets and social spaces without the barriers that had defined council stations. "We learned from your mistakes," River said without hostility. "You built separate quarters for each species and called it accommodation. We built shared spaces with adaptive environmental controls and called it integration." Admiral Creston studied the technical readouts her staff had compiled. "Your life support systems manage 47 different species requirements simultaneously. That should be impossible." "It was impossible," River agreed, "until humans stopped trying to standardize everything and started treating diversity as a feature instead of a problem. Every species brings unique needs, but also unique solutions. We listened to all of them." Brenvik had come prepared to negotiate from a position of authority. That position eroded with every moment he spent on the station. The council had 3,000 years of history, vast fleets, and ancient prestige. But prestige could not make incompatible computer systems communicate. History could not repair broken infrastructure. "Earth's government sent you alone?" he asked, implying youth and inexperience. "They sent someone who understands the systems you need fixed," River replied. "Would you prefer a senior diplomat who has never calibrated a fusion coupling?" Rilna's wings buzzed with amusement despite herself. The human had a point. "We come seeking assistance with critical infrastructure failures. We are prepared to offer substantial payment." "We don't want your money," River said. "We want something you never gave us: recognition, voice, partnership." "Those are vague terms," Brenvik objected. "What specifically do you demand?" River activated a holographic display. "First, acknowledgement, public admission from the council that human contributions were essential and human warnings were ignored. Second, representation, voting power proportional to contribution, not species age or political influence. Third, education. You will establish the technical training programs we proposed 15 years ago. Fourth, independence. Humans work with the council as partners, not as members. We maintain our own government and territories." "Unacceptable," Brenvik said immediately. "You demand we restructure the entire council system." "We demand you fix a broken system," River corrected. "The council claims to represent galactic civilization, but it represents only the species powerful enough to demand seats. Young species, small species, and different species get ignored until you need something from them." Admiral Creston leaned forward. "And if we refuse your terms?" "Then we continue building our own civilization," River said simply. "We have trade partners, defensive alliances, and growing territories. We will miss the council's resources, but we will survive. Can you say the same without us?" The question hung in the air. They all knew the answer. Council space was fracturing along species lines as cooperation failed. Some worlds faced food shortages. Others had lost medical capabilities. The financial system was collapsing. They needed humanity far more than humanity needed them. Perhaps we could negotiate partial terms, Rilna suggested. Agree on technical assistance in exchange for increased representation. No, River said. Humans tried partial measures for 80 years. We proposed, you tabled. We warned, you dismissed. We contributed, you took it for granted. Either you commit to real change or we stay separated. Brenvik's skin flushed dark green with anger. You forget yourself, human. The Council has maintained order for 3 millennia. The Council maintained stagnation, River replied. You stopped innovating because you did not have to. You stopped listening because nobody could make you. You became comfortable and comfort made you lazy. Now reality is forcing you to change and you resent it. How dare you, Brenvik began, but Rilna cut him off. She is right, Chancellor. We have been coasting on past achievements. When was the last time the Council developed new technology instead of just maintaining old systems? When did we last solve a problem through innovation instead of protocol? Admiral Creston consulted her datapad. My analysts report that human stations have developed 17 new technologies in the past 6 months. Innovations in power generation, environmental control, medical treatment, and material science. All by combining approaches from different species in ways we never considered. Because you never let different species work together as equals, River said. You put everyone in boxes. Felarians do engineering, Centaurans do biology, Trekari do art. You never asked what happens when a Felarian engineer and a Centauran biologist collaborate. Humans did, and the results surprised everyone. Brenvik stood to leave. This is pointless. You demand we abandon principles that have guided the Council for thousands of years. I demand you remember why the Council exists, River said. It was founded to prevent conflict between species, to enable cooperation, to make the galaxy safer for everyone. But somewhere along the way, it became about power and precedent instead of purpose. You can return to that purpose, or you can watch the galaxy move on without you. After the Council delegation departed, River contacted Earth's diplomatic corps. They are not ready to agree yet, Brenvik especially. They still think they can wait us out. Then we wait, came the response from Earth. Time is on our side. River looked out at the station's commerce level again. A Felarian merchant was teaching a Trekari child about crystal growth. A Centauran chef had just opened a restaurant serving human recipes adapted for different species. A mixed-species engineering team was designing better solar collectors. This was what galactic civilization could be. Not separate species tolerating each other, but genuine integration creating something new. The Council would either learn that lesson or become irrelevant. Either way, humanity would continue building the future. With the Council if possible, without them if necessary. 3 days later, reports arrived of riots on Council worlds. Citizens demanding their governments accept human terms. Businesses demanding restoration of critical services. Students protesting the closure of multi-species universities. The political pressure was building. Change was coming, whether the Chancellor liked it or not. Brenvik's personal archive held records dating back 800 years. His ancestors had helped establish the Council during a period of brutal interspecies warfare. They had created the voting system, the protocols, the structures that brought order to chaos. Their legacy defined his identity. Now he stood alone in the archive chamber, reviewing footage of humanity's early contact with the Council. A smaller, more hesitant Earth delegation presenting credentials. The Council had granted them provisional membership, a kindness to young species who showed promise. Nobody had imagined humans would become indispensable. You built this place as a sanctuary, Admiral Creston said from the doorway. But sanctuaries can become prisons if you never leave them. You too, Brenvik did not turn around. First Rilna, now you. Has everyone forgotten their loyalty? My loyalty is to the Council's survival, not its pride, Creston replied. She approached the display Brenvik was watching. Young human engineers installing communication relays between species whose languages had no common framework. I had the Military Intelligence Division research human homeworld. Do you know why they adapted so well to galactic civilization? Because they are pushy and refuse to know their place, Brenvik muttered. Because Earth tried to kill them for 3 million years, Creston said. Predators, diseases, climate shifts, resource scarcity. Their world had every environmental extreme the galaxy possesses, all on one planet. They evolved to handle anything because anything could happen. She pulled up geological data showing Earth's violent history, ice ages and heat waves, volcanic eruptions and asteroid impacts, droughts and floods. Every other council species evolved in relative stability. We optimized for our specific environments. Humans had no choice but to become generalists. That made them perfect for bridging our differences. It also made them arrogant, Brenvik said. Did it? Creston challenged. Or did we mistake competence for arrogance because it came from species we considered inferior? I reviewed the voting records. In 80 years, humans proposed 112 initiatives. Every single one was designed to improve council infrastructure or help less powerful species. Not once did they propose something that benefited only Earth. Brenvik finally turned to face her. What are you saying? I am saying we broke something precious through our own short-sightedness. And if we do not fix it, we deserve what happens next. On the Felarian homeworld, protests had grown from hundreds to millions. Citizens filled the streets demanding their government accept human terms, not because they loved humans particularly, but because their lives had become unbearable without the systems humans maintained. Speaker Vorna addressed the crowds from the Planetary Assembly building. We understand your frustration. The Council is negotiating with Earth. Negotiating implies both sides have equal positions, someone shouted back. Accept their terms before we have no medical supplies, no food shipments, no working infrastructure at all. Similar scenes played across dozens of council worlds. The political consensus that had supported Brenvik's hardline position was evaporating. Leaders who had publicly supported his stance were privately begging him to compromise. Rilna compiled the data into a presentation for the full council session. Charts showing economic decline, infrastructure failures, and social unrest. The trend lines were unmistakable. Accept human terms now or face systemic collapse within weeks. We could survive this, Brenvik argued to the assembled delegates. Short-term pain for long-term independence. We can rebuild our own expertise. In how many years? Demanded the Trakari ambassador, whose people faced critical medical shortages. How many of my citizens should die while we train technicians to replace skills we rejected when humans offered to teach them? The Felarian proposal for immediate acceptance of human terms has broad support, Rilna announced. We should vote. And what happens to council authority? Brenvik asked. If we capitulate to human demands, what stops every other species from making similar demands? The system collapses. The system has already collapsed, Rilna said quietly. We are just deciding whether to build something better or cling to the wreckage. The vote was 221 in favor of accepting human terms, 26 against. Brenvik did not need to check the display to know he had lost. The faces around the chamber told the story. Very well, he said. I will transmit acceptance to Earth's government. But let the record show that I believe this decision will fundamentally alter the nature of galactic governance in ways we will regret. Let the record also show, Rilna added, that our arrogance and inflexibility created this crisis. Humans only asked for what should have been freely given, respect. Voice, partnership. Earth's response arrived within hours. They would send technical teams to assist with critical infrastructure, but not as council employees. As independent contractors working under new terms. They would help establish training programs, but council species would do the actual learning. They would share technologies, but only with species willing to share in return. Most significantly, they would not rejoin the council. Instead, they would participate in a new organization called the Galactic Partnership Initiative, open to any species regardless of age or power. Decisions made by contribution and consensus rather than historical precedent, focused on solving problems rather than maintaining traditions. Several species announced immediate withdrawal from the council to join the partnership. Others declared they would maintain dual membership. The council that had governed the galaxy for 3,000 years was fracturing, not through war but through irrelevance. Brenvik watched it happen with complex emotions. Part of him grieved for lost certainty. Part of him wondered if Rilna and Creston were right. Perhaps the council had outlived its original purpose. Perhaps new structures were necessary for changing times. He thought about his ancestors who had built the council during war. They had been pragmatic, willing to try radical new approaches to achieve peace. When had their descendants become so rigid? Chancellor, his aide interrupted his thoughts. The human technical teams are arriving. They are requesting a meeting to coordinate infrastructure repairs. Tell them I will meet with them personally, Brenvik said. It is time I learned what we have been missing. The aide looked surprised but transmitted the message. Brenvik gathered his dignity and prepared to do something he had never done before. Listen to humans not as subjects or servants but as equals, perhaps even as teachers. Change was never comfortable, but stagnation led to death. The galaxy was moving forward. The only question was whether the council would move with it or be left behind. Brenvik chose to move forward. 5 years changed everything and nothing. The Galactic Council still existed, though half its former members had departed for the Partnership Initiative. The galaxy remained connected through trade and communication, though the networks functioned differently now. And humans no longer occupied a subordinate position, though many still did not fully understand why that mattered. Pravis had rebuilt his textile business into something larger than before. He now operated from New Nairobi Station, employing workers from 17 species and shipping products through both council and partnership trade routes. The separation that had seemed so catastrophic turned out to create opportunity for those willing to adapt. I heard the old logistics hub finally reopened, he told River during one of their regular meetings. Council hired a mixed-species team trained by human instructors. Took them 3 years to understand what you people did intuitively. River smiled while reviewing shipping schedules on her datapad. Not intuitively. We just grew up thinking that different was normal instead of threatening. When you expect diversity, you build systems to handle it. The council is learning, Pravis said. Slowly, painfully, but learning. On Council Station Alpha, Brenvik supervised the graduation ceremony for the first class of multi-species systems engineers. 50 students from 12 different species who had spent 2 years learning to think across specialties. They would never have the instinctive grasp that humans developed from growing up on a death world, but they could be trained to ask the right questions. Rilna joined him on the observation deck overlooking the ceremony. You should be proud. This program was your initiative. It was humanity's initiative 15 years ago, Brenvik corrected. I simply stopped being too stubborn to implement it. Personal growth at your age is noteworthy, Rilna teased gently. Some species ossify in their thinking after a few centuries. Brenvik's throat sac inflated with amusement rather than anger. 5 years had taught him to laugh at himself, a skill he had lacked before the crisis. I was convinced humans were trying to undermine council authority. I could not see that they were trying to save us from our own short-sightedness. Below them, the graduates received their certifications. They would disperse across council space to maintain infrastructure that human teams had stabilized but not replaced. The goal was independence, not dependence. Partnership, not subordination. "Have you visited the partnership stations?" Rilna asked. "3 times now," Brenvik admitted. "Their approach is chaotic compared to council protocols, but the chaos produces unexpected innovations. Last month, a Trekari artist and a Felarian engineer collaborated on a new solar panel design that is 30% more efficient than anything we developed in 3,000 years. Because nobody told them it was impossible," Rilna observed. "Council protocols prevent many failures, but they also prevent many successes." Admiral Creston's military assessment had proven prescient. The partnership stations were not preparing for war with the Council. They were preparing to defend themselves if necessary while focusing primarily on growth and exploration. Their defensive platforms used hybrid technologies that made Council analysts nervous because they represented approaches nobody had considered. But 5 years of observation showed the partnership had no aggressive intentions. They wanted to be left alone to build their vision of galactic civilization. Some council members saw this as threat, others saw it as opportunity. "The dual membership model is working," Creston reported to the remaining council leadership. 73 species maintain ties to both organizations. They benefit from council stability and partnership innovation. "And the species that left entirely?" asked a delegate. "Thriving, mostly," Creston said. "The partnership accepts everyone willing to contribute. Species too small or too different for council membership have found homes there. Some are developing technologies that will likely benefit the entire galaxy." Tessa Wade, no longer young or junior, represented Earth in discussions about deeper cooperation between the two organizations. She had witnessed humanity's departure and now helped navigate their reintegration on new terms. The work was delicate, requiring constant balance between competing interests. "Neither organization should dominate," she explained during a joint conference. "The Council provides stability through proven structures. The partnership provides innovation through experimentation. The galaxy benefits from both approaches." "Some would say that is inefficient," a council traditionalist argued. "Some would say that redundancy is survival," Tessa countered. "Humanity learned that lesson on Earth. Our world was too harsh for single solutions. We survived because we tried everything and kept what worked." Dr. Henley Park had returned to medical work, though not for the Council. She ran a teaching hospital on Partnership Station Harmony, where physicians from dozens of species learned to treat patients whose biology they had never studied. The cross-species medical knowledge base was expanding faster than anyone had predicted. "We made medicine too specialized," she told her students. "We treated each species in isolation, but bodies are systems and systems have patterns. Once you understand the patterns, you can recognize them across different biologies." Her former colleague, the Felarian doctor who had taken over her council position, visited regularly to learn. Pride had given way to pragmatism. Knowledge was more valuable than ego. Galissa's restaurant had reopened with a different model. Instead of one establishment serving everyone, she had partnered with chefs from multiple species to create a food hall where different biologies could eat safely in shared social space. The concept spread rapidly across both council and partnership stations. "Humans didn't invent this idea," Galissa explained to a journalist. "They just showed us that accommodation and integration are not the same thing. We don't all have to be identical. We just have to respect our differences while finding common ground." Ambassador David Ross had retired from diplomacy, but he watched developments with satisfaction from his home on Earth. The young man who had joined the council full of hope had become an old man who saw that hope fulfilled, though not in the way he had imagined. "We didn't change the galaxy," he told his grandchildren. "We just stopped pretending to be something we weren't." The galaxy changed itself once it realized cooperation beats dominance. The two organizations, council and partnership, continued evolving, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing, always pushing each other to improve. The galaxy was messier than it had been under unified council authority. It was also more innovative, more inclusive, and more resilient. Previs summed it up during a trade conference where council and partnership members worked together on new shipping routes. "We all thought humanity leaving was the crisis. Turned out humanity leaving was the cure. We were sick with complacency. The cure hurt, but we are healthier now." River stood at the viewport of New Nairobi Station, watching ships from both organizations dock peacefully. Humans, Felarians, Trekari, Centaurans, and dozens of other species moving between stations without barriers. Not the forced unity of the old council, but genuine cooperation built on mutual respect. The galaxy had learned what Earth had always known. Diversity was not a problem to be solved. It was a strength to be celebrated, and the future belonged to those who understood the difference.